I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen Bee.
There are moments in royal history when no declaration is needed, no argument required, yet a single small detail is enough to silence the entire room. A state banquet was being held to showcase the unity, dignity, and image of the royal family before heads of state. King Charles desired a perfect evening. Catherine appeared with her usual composure. Camilla entered in a magnificent gown, bathed in chandeliers, and under the watchful eyes of hundreds. Then, in just a few brief seconds, everything changed. Catherine's gaze fell upon the brooch on Camilla's dress. According to the story, told it was a brooch once associated with Princess Diana. Catherine fell silent. William immediately noticed the unusual expression on his wife's face. No one spoke, no argument, but the entire atmosphere of the state banquet seemed to freeze. Could a single piece of jewelry really shake an entire state banquet? Or perhaps what was truly touched was never the brooch itself, but the memories, the wounds, and the boundaries that have never healed. Before the story begins, please subscribe to the channel and watch until the end of the video. Because that tiny brooch is not just a piece of jewelry, but the focal point of a story about memories, honor, and the secrets behind the doors of the royal family that we will explore below.
Princess of Wales back on the global stage. Kate's first international trip since her cancer recovery, stepping out on her own, a research trip of sorts, learning about a cause she cares deeply about.
Thousands of people have packed the square. People are hanging out the windows, and you can see her right here.
A state banquet is never just a dinner. It's the most important diplomatic stage for the royal family, where every glance, every step, every piece of jewelry can carry a meaning far beyond its outward appearance. Everything in that room is meticulously prepared seating arrangements, lighting menu greetings attire, and even the symbols presented to the public. Therefore, the brooch on Camilla's dress cannot be considered a random detail. For Catherine, that brooch wasn't just a beautiful piece of jewelry. It was a memory. It was the image of Princess Diana. It was a part of the past that William never truly left. Catherine understood that some mementos cannot be used simply to adorn a formal dress or create a conciliatory image for the cameras. For her, that brooch needed to be treated with respect, caution, and above all with the consent of those who truly carried that pain in their hearts. For William, the brooch held a deeper meaning. It evoked not only the image of his mother, but also a childhood of loss. Diana wasn't just a name in royal history to William. She was his mother. She was a memory. Her absence had shaped how he protected his family for years. Therefore, seeing the brooch on Camilla's dress at a formal state banquet, William saw more than just an old item. He saw private pain brought into the public spotlight. For Camilla, however, the brooch could have a completely different meaning. In her view, it might have been a gesture of reconciliation, a sign that old divisions had finally been closed. Camilla might have wanted to demonstrate that the present and the past could coexist in a unified image. But the problem is, reconciliation cannot be declared from one side. A symbol can only heal when those who have been hurt are also willing to accept it. For King Charles, the brooch was a reminder of a past that never truly ended. He wanted the evening to be perfect for the royal family to show unity, but a single small detail brought back old wounds. Charles understood that this was no longer about jewelry. It was about memory, honor, and the right to decide how Diana would be remembered. Therefore, from the moment Catherine saw the brooch, the focus of the evening shifted from the state banquet from diplomacy and from formal ceremonies. All eyes, all emotions, and all the tension in the room were focused on a small object pinned to Camilla's dress. That brooch had become the center of the entire evening, But if you only look at what happened during the state dinner, it's easy to think it all started the moment Catherine saw the brooch on Camilla's dress. According to the story, the truth is different. The seeds of that confrontation had been sown weeks earlier in a private meeting behind the doors of Kensington Palace. It was a small gathering without press, without guests, and without any formality. The atmosphere in the room was completely different from official royal receptions. On the table were files, lists, and memorabilia related to Princess Diana, prepared for a future memorial service. Each item held its own story, its own memory, and therefore every decision related to them was considered extremely sensitive. Present at that meeting were Catherine, Prince William, King Charles, and Sophie, who was always considered one of Catherine's closest and most trusted confidants. No one entered the room intending to cause a disagreement. The initial goal was simply to examine the memorabilia and agree on how to preserve and use them in commemorative events. Catherine spoke very little at the beginning of the meeting. She spent most of her time observing the items that had been associated with Diana. These were not merely precious royal artifacts. In Catherine's mind, they were irreplaceable memories, a testament to a mother William always cherished, and a deeply emotional part of the family's history. It was in this quiet atmosphere that Catherine made what was considered a very clear request. She wished that Diana's brooch not be used in any public event without William's direct consent. It wasn't a request of authority, nor was it a command. As the story portrays it, Catherine simply wanted to protect a boundary she believed needed to be respected. William hardly argued at the time. He listened silently, then gazed at the brooch without touching it. That silence held more significance than any words. For William, it wasn't just a piece of jewelry that once belonged to his mother. It evoked childhood memories, both beautiful and painful memories that time couldn't erase. Therefore, using the brooch at a public event was something he couldn't take lightly. The meeting seemed to have ended peacefully, but as the story unfolded, a subsequent piece of information completely changed the atmosphere. Camilla was reportedly expressing a desire to wear the brooch at the upcoming state banquet, intending to make it a symbol of reconciliation and unity. This idea immediately sparked conflicting viewpoints. While Camilla was seen as wanting to send a positive message, Catherine saw the risk of a memento associated with Diana being placed in a context she deemed inappropriate. William was also said to have disagreed with this proposal. He believed that Diana's personal belongings needed to be carefully protected and should not be displayed publicly without the family's clear consent. All eyes then turned to King Charles. As the head of the royal family, the final decision rested almost entirely with him. However, according to the story, Charles did not make a definitive commitment. He listened to the opinions of all parties, but did not confirm whether the brooch would be kept or used. This silence left those present unsure of what would happen next. Perhaps at that very moment, the meeting in Kensington ceased to be simply a preparation for Diana's memorial service. It became the site of the first signs of a simmering disagreement. There were no arguments, no public confrontations, but differences in perspective regarding memory, respect, and the meaning of the brooch had begun to emerge. That was the first warning. And weeks later, when the doors of the state banquet hall opened, everything that had been said in that closed-door meeting would come back to life, this time not in the privacy of Kensington, but before the entire state banquet. After seeing the brooch on Camilla's dress, Catherine didn't react immediately. She remained seated for a few moments, her eyes fixed on the jewelry reflecting in the crystal chandelier. Around her, the soft clinking of cutlery continued. Diplomatic conversations went on, and no one seemed to notice the undercurrent that had just begun to stir in the room. William was the first to sense it. He looked at Catherine, then followed her gaze. In an instant, he understood what had silenced his wife. Without explanation, William realized that the brooch Camilla was wearing was a memento connected to Diana, the mother he had never stopped remembering. The atmosphere began to change. Camilla also noticed Catherine's gaze on her. At first, she tried to maintain her usual polite smile, but then reflexively, her hand lightly touched the brooch on her shoulder, as if to make sure it was still in place. That very small gesture made the tension even more apparent. According to the story, it was the moment Camilla understood that Catherine had recognized the brooch almost instantly. At the head of the table, King Charles also began observing the unusual movements. Having experienced countless diplomatic ceremonies, he understood that even a slight change in body language could signal an unexpected situation. The king's gaze shifted repeatedly from Catherine to William, then to Camilla. His face remained calm, but his caution grew increasingly apparent. Then something unexpected happened. Catherine slowly rose. There was no haste or anger in her movements. She rose very slowly, so calmly that it drew the attention of the entire room. The chair shifted slightly, creating a small sound in the otherwise noisy room. That sound seemed to signal all eyes to turn towards the head table. The waiters preparing to bring the next course paused involuntarily. Their trays remained in their hands, but no one moved. Conversations among the guests fell silent. They looked at each other, then all turned to Catherine in astonishment. William immediately rose behind his wife. He didn't stand up to stop Catherine, nor did he try to pull her back down. He simply stepped close enough for everyone to understand that she wasn't alone. Without a speech, without a forceful gesture, William's presence was a clear affirmation that he chose to stand by Catherine in that difficult moment. Camilla began to show signs of tension. Her initial composure was fading. While still trying to maintain the demeanor of a diplomatic ceremony, she was described as no longer as comfortable as before. Her gaze shifted repeatedly between Catherine and Charles, as if awaiting a reaction from the king. Charles understood that the situation was spiraling beyond the bounds of ordinary diplomatic protocol. He no longer saw a perfect state banquet as originally planned. Instead, he witnessed an old memory resurfacing in the midst of a room packed with international guests. And then Catherine spoke, not with a lengthy speech, not with reproaches or accusations. She made a short but powerful request to stop the ceremony. That request brought the entire room into near total silence. Remarkably, according to the story, there were no shouts, no public arguments. No one protested or debated loudly. Instead, there was a prolonged silence where all eyes were focused on those standing around the table. From the moment Catherine stood up, Diana's brooch ceased to be merely a piece of jewelry. It became a symbol of memory, of unbridgeable boundaries, and of a confrontation that no one in the room could continue to ignore. After Catherine requested a halt to the ceremony, the entire room fell silent, so quiet that even the slightest movement of the chairs could be heard. No one knew what would happen next. The diplomats remained seated, the staff stood motionless, and all eyes were on the two women who had become the center of attention at the state banquet. Catherine maintained her composure. There was no visible anger on her face, no outbursts of emotion. According to the story, it was precisely this calmness that made the atmosphere heavier. She looked directly at Camilla, maintaining a steady gaze for a few seconds before speaking. "Why are you wearing that brooch?" It was a short question, not loud, not accusatory. But in the silent space of the state banquet, each word resonated clearly. The question was not simply about a piece of jewelry. It raised questions about respect, about Diana's memory, and about the boundary between public symbolism and private pain. Camilla took a shallow breath before answering. Initially, she tried to maintain the composure of a member of the royal family. Camilla explained that she had no intention of hurting anyone. In her mind, the brooch was chosen as a symbol of reconciliation, a way of showing that past divisions could be closed. She wanted to send an image of unity to the international guests as a message that the royal family could move forward together. But that explanation seemed to do little to change the atmosphere in the room. Catherine remained silently watching Camilla. She didn't interrupt, nor did she immediately refute. That very silence made each explanation seem heavier. For Catherine, the issue was never the intention, but the meaning of the brooch itself. Standing beside his wife, William remained silent. His silence became a crucial part of the confrontation. No one heard William argue or question Camilla. His face spoke volumes. It was the face of a son witnessing the memory of his mother become the focal point of a public ceremony. He didn't need to speak to express his position. His continued presence beside Catherine was the clearest answer. At the head of the table, Charles observed the proceedings. The king was described as barely taking his eyes off the conversation. He understood that one more uncontrolled reaction could turn the state banquet into a diplomatic crisis. But at the same time, he realized this was no longer a matter that could be resolved by ordinary protocol. The international guests began to notice something was changing. Although not everyone understood the meaning of the brooch or the stories behind it, they could feel the tension spreading throughout the room. Conversation ceased completely. No more clinking glasses, no more polite smiles. The entire state banquet seemed to be waiting for the king's next decision. After a few moments of observation, Charles finally spoke. His voice retained its usual calmness, but was clear enough for everyone to hear. The king ordered Camilla to remove the brooch. It was a brief request. No explanation, no debate. Simply a decision made in the middle of the state banquet. Camilla didn't immediately comply. She paused for a very brief moment, perhaps only a few seconds. But that very pause became the highlight of the entire segment. For Catherine, that hesitation deepened her pain. In her mind, if the brooch was truly just a symbol of reconciliation, why was it so difficult to remove it? William noticed the hesitation. His expression hardened. He didn't step forward. He didn't interrupt the conversation. But that restraint only made the atmosphere heavier. Diana's son remained standing silently witnessing everything unfolding before him. And it was then that Charles understood that things had gone beyond the limits of a mere ceremonial incident. This was no longer a misunderstanding about clothing or an insensitive choice. The confrontation had transformed into a crisis of memory symbolism and belief within the royal family itself. From the moment Camilla hesitated before the king's request, Charles realized that even if the brooch were removed immediately afterward, the state banquet would never be the same again. Although the state banquet continued as scheduled, it was all just a formality. Music still played in the grand hall. The staff continued to gently bring dishes to the tables. The international guests maintained their diplomatic smiles and continued their polite conversations. But behind that peaceful facade, everyone sensed that the most important event of the evening was no longer at the banquet table. The brooch had been removed, but a heavy atmosphere still hung over the room. Catherine did not return to her seat after the ceremony resumed. She quietly rose and left the main table without drawing any further attention. There was no statement to the press, no act of protest, just slow steps out of the hall as if she needed some space to regain her composure after what had just happened. For Catherine, what hurt her was not just the brooch. What troubled her more was the feeling that the warning given in the closed-door meeting weeks earlier seemed to have gone unheard. She believed that if that boundary had been respected from the beginning, the state banquet would never have fallen into this state. William didn't let Catherine go alone. He quickly left the table and followed his wife. Throughout the short walk to the private room next to the main hall, they barely spoke. William understood that sometimes presence was more important than any words of comfort. He simply stayed silently by Catherine's side, as he always had protected his family from the vicissitudes of royal life. Meanwhile, King Charles remained in the main hall to fulfill his duties as monarch. He continued to receive guests and keep the program running smoothly. However, behind that calm exterior lay a series of thoughts he couldn't shake off. Charles understood that what had just happened was no longer just an awkward diplomatic situation. It had become an issue that could affect the inner beliefs of the royal family itself. It was at that moment that Princess Anne approached the king. No need for loud words, no need for harsh criticism. Anne gently reminded Charles that this was no longer a story about a piece of jewelry. She warned that the real issue lay in judgment, in how symbols associated with Diana were used, and in the feelings of those who still held Diana's memory sacred. That reminder silenced Charles for a long time. He understood that simply offering an official explanation wouldn't end it. What was needed now wasn't to control public opinion, but to find out exactly what had happened behind the palace doors before the brooch appeared at the state banquet. Immediately after the guests left, Charles issued his first internal order. He ordered a thorough review of all approval records related to Diana's brooch. At the same time, all documents regarding access to Diana's personal memorabilia had to be re-examined from scratch. It was a thorough review. Who suggested using the brooch? Who reviewed it? Who approved it? Who made the final decision? Each file was retrieved from the archives. The approval chain was checked step by step. The names of assistants, artifact managers, and those with access appeared in the documents. Initially, everyone thought it was just a personal decision. But the more they examined it, the more complicated the picture became. William also reviewed these files, hoping to find a single error or a poorly considered decision by an individual. However, what he discovered was completely different. The brooch did not appear at the state banquet after just one signature. It had gone through numerous review steps and various levels of approval before being allowed to be used. That discovery left William speechless. It meant that many people knew about the plan, but no one stopped to question whether using a memento associated with Diana in that context was appropriate. That very moment made Charles realize the seriousness of the situation. This was no longer a controversial decision at a state banquet. It reflected how symbols of Diana's spiritual value had been handled within the royal family. And from that moment on, the brooch was no longer simply a piece of jewelry. It became the focal point of a crisis of responsibility, trust, and boundaries that the royal family would face after that tumultuous night at the state banquet. After all the glances, silences, and whispers in the grand hall, Catherine made only one request: she wanted to see Camilla privately. No assistants, no bodyguards, no press. There was no one to mediate to turn grief into a ritual or a conversation into a palace announcement. The private room behind the grand hall was smaller, quieter, and heavier than anywhere else in the palace that night. Outside, the lights of the state banquet still shone, but inside that room, all titles seemed to have been set aside. Catherine entered first. She was no longer the image of a future princess standing amidst a diplomatic event. In that moment, she was simply a woman protecting the memory of a mother-in-law she had never met, but whom she knew lived deeply in William's heart. Camilla sat opposite her. The brooch had been removed from the dress, but its presence still permeated the room. It lay in a small box, silent, yet like the sole witness to the entire evening. Catherine looked at Camilla for a long time before speaking. Her voice was neither high nor shaky nor angry. It was this very calmness that made each word heavier. She said that Diana's memory could not be used as a tool for creating imagery. It could not be placed on a ceremonial dress simply to prove that the past had been healed. A symbol associated with William's pain could not be used to send a message of reconciliation that William himself had never agreed to. Camilla tried to explain. She said she didn't want to hurt anyone. She wanted the brooch to be a sign of acceptance, a way to show that the family had moved past old divisions. She wanted the state banquet to be an image of unity, not confrontation. But the more Camilla spoke, the softer her voice became. Catherine didn't interrupt. She listened. But her eyes made Camilla understand that the issue wasn't about intention. The issue was a wound that couldn't be healed by bringing it out into the public eye. Reconciliation couldn't be achieved with a piece of jewelry. Peace couldn't be pinned to a dress as a decoration. And acceptance couldn't be derived from another's pain. Camilla bowed her head. For a few seconds, the room was completely silent. Then she opened the small box and placed the brooch on the table between them. The movement was slow and heavy, as if she weren't just placing down a piece of jewelry, but the illusion that all the past could be closed with a beautiful symbol. She said she wouldn't use the brooch again. Catherine didn't smile, nor did she show any sign of victory. She only nodded slightly. A promise couldn't erase what had happened in the hall, but at least it could prevent the wound from reopening. A few minutes later, William entered. He didn't ask what they had said. He didn't ask who was right or wrong. He only saw the brooch on the table no longer on Camilla's dress. And that image alone told him that the confrontation had ended in the quietest yet most painful way. No more music, no more banquet lights. Only a brooch lay silently in the room, and 3 people understood that from that night onward, the memory of Diana would never again be treated as an arbitrary symbol. By the following morning, the state banquet was no longer a private event behind palace doors. The image of Catherine rising in the grand hall, Camilla silently removing her brooch, and William standing silently beside his wife, quickly became the focus of all discussion. The press reported widely. The public reacted strongly. For many, what was shocking was not just Camilla wearing a memento once associated with Diana, but the feeling that this memory had been placed in such a sensitive position on a night that should have been dedicated to unity and dignity. Charles understood that a short statement could not appease everyone. The king issued new regulations regarding Diana's personal mementos. From then on, all items associated with her would have to be carefully examined before appearing at any public event. William supported this decision without hesitation. For him, it wasn't about controlling royal jewelry. That was a way of protecting the memory of her mother, a memory that shouldn't be used as a tool for image building or diplomatic symbolism. Anne later told Catherine that what she did wasn't defiance. It was responsibility. Catherine stood up at a time when silence could have diminished an important memory. So that night wasn't just about a brooch. It was about memory dignity and the boundaries a family doesn't want to lose. Catherine didn't break the royal family. She reminded the royal family that there are symbols that cannot be used arbitrarily, especially when they carry the pain of a deceased person and the love of those who remain. If you find stories about the royal family symbols, and history always contain multiple layers of meaning, please subscribe to the channel to follow the next videos. And please leave a comment below. If you were in that situation, would you choose to remain silent to protect the ritual, or speak up to defend what you believe is right?